Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love what you see here, everything is for sale. We're waking up with watches, and to ask questions about the pricing of any of these watches, reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. We're also looking to build inventory. Buy, sell, or trade watches with the Watchbox. We will buy your entire collection. We pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. To buy, trade, or sell a watch, tmosso at thewatchbox.com is your online concierge. Let's discuss a lovely Rolex Oyster Perpetual Datejust 36, 116234 white gold bezel, stainless steel case, and bracelet in 904L steel. This watch is a classic. Tuxedo dial, silver center, black lacquered hour track. We have a little white on black railroad track outboard for reading your minutes and seconds. A silver sunburst center underneath white gold fluted baton style hands, white gold indices, white gold crown. This watch is extremely versatile, being dress style with the Jubilee bracelet, the tuxedo dial, and the fluted white gold bezel, but it's also well loomed, automatic winding, and 100 meters water resistant, which makes it a sports watch. 36 millimeters in diameter. The bezel, properly speaking, is called gray gold. It's a white gold alloy that never needs to be plated with rhodium, so it's white all the way through. We have the 5-link Jubilee bracelet, which is a dress-style bracelet at Rolex, but with the modern iteration being solid center link, solid end link, and a thick gauge clasp, it's now robust enough to be a sports bracelet. And because of its many small links, it actually vents the wrist better than the 3-link Oyster sports bracelet from Rolex. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. It wears this watch well. You can see it's flat enough to fit underneath the cuff. Absolutely no issues there. Take a quick look and judge for yourself. It is a watch that's suitable for men or women, as it has a roughly 44 millimeter lug-to-lug span. And again, all of the modern tech, chronometer certified, anti-magnetic hairspring, overcoil hairspring, caliber 3135 inside, the same as you would have found a Submariner back at this time. And this watch with an M serial number was from 2008. So back then, this would have been the same movement you found in the Sub. You don't need a GMT, a Daytona, or a Sub to own the definitive Rolex. This model goes back to 1945, and it is part of the canon of Rolex Senior over the big three sports models. Now let's cross the city of Geneva and talk about Patek Philippe and the Nautilus collection. The 5711 is dead for 2022, but this is perhaps the most versatile watch Patek has made in the modern era. While many laud the 5711 for its combination of ruggedness and elegance, the 5990-1A, which launched in 2014, gives you all of that, but it also gives you a flyback chronograph and a travel time complication, a second time zone that you can hide when you don't need it. The watch features AM/PM for both home and local time, and it's rare for a dual-time watch to give you both day-night, locally, and away. Now you can see as a chronograph, it has a 60-minute chronograph register at 6 o'clock, which is uncommon on chronographs. I like it, very practical. There's a pointer date up at 12 o'clock on the dial. All hands and indices are white gold, and the watch is well loomed. And in spite of the fact that the wing on the flank is for the travel time functionality, we have 2 chronograph pushers, all of that, the watch still has 120-meter water resistance. And it's not a big watch. It's 40.5 millimeters in diameter and between 12.6 and 12.8 millimeters thick. So 40.5 is hardly oversized in the modern era. And you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, the watch wears really, really well. It's even flat enough that it'll fit underneath most cuffs, and the bracelet is quite comfortable. It is substantial for a Nautilus, there's no doubt. It doesn't feel thin the way the 5712 and the 5711 feel thin, but nor is it enormous like a Royal Oak Offshore is. The timepiece, of course, features a Patek Philippe manually settable travel time functionality with automatic winding chronograph. By the way, look how the wings work. This is how you set the travel time system. And it's 55-hour power reserve, automatic winding with ceramic rotor bearings. It has a 6-position adjusted free-sprung Gyromax style balance. It has an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, and it's guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day. You can also see the column wheel system, as it is a column wheel and vertical clutch chronograph, but it's also a flyback chronograph, so you can reset and restart with a single push of the trigger. And again, a 55-hour power reserve, solidly more power reserve than you get on something like a Nautilus 5711 or 5712. A very, very versatile watch with a beautifully hand-finished bracelet, as classically handsome as the Nautilus bracelet has ever been, and it has a double folding deployant clasp with a clamshell lock and ceramic pin snaps so that the clamshell will not wear down the tolerances over time. It will remain tight and secure on the wrist. This is a watch that can do it all. Now, if we want to go way up market, out to Le Chaux de Fonds and Grubel Forsey. This is the Balancier S2, the convex, and it has a charcoal dial. They're going to make 88 of these, and they're going to do it in batches of 22 per year to maintain their production of roughly 150 watches a year. Now, this is a sports watch from Grubel Forsey. It is 43.5 millimeters wide by 46.4 millimeters lug to lug, meaning although it's a big watch, it is exceptionally wearable, as the watch is made almost entirely of sapphire and titanium, very light materials. The movement is made of grade 5 titanium, both bridges and plates, and the case is made of titanium. And you can see it's thick, at about 16 millimeters thick, but it's easy to wear, as the lugs, or I should say the edge of the bezel, because it's a lugless watch, come nowhere near the edge of my wrist, so you could wear this on a much smaller wrist. Now you can see, compared to the original Balancier Sport, this watch features much larger cantilevered hour indices, and that pays dividends, as the watch is much easier to see in the dark, as the luminescent indices are larger. Now you can also appreciate the fact that this watch bears all, keeps no secrets. All of the fun stuff is on the dial side. You have here the escapement, you have the balance, and you have the overcoil hairspring and the free sprung regulator. You have two stacked mainspring barrels and a power reserve indicator. The watch has a manual wind power reserve of up to 3 days. It beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, and you can see that the balance is inclined, both to provide a better view of the mechanism and to better help to average out the effects of gravity. You can see that there is an enormous flying balance, or I should say flying bridge, adjacent to the balance for the motion works, and you can see the motion works, which are used to adjust the hand quite well. The watch does feature a conventional seconds hand adjacent to the balance. You can see it is a recessed bolt, variable polar moment balance. Everything is gorgeous and hand finished. You can see that the top of the balance bridge, or the half bridge, is black polish, and there is satination across the plates. Turn it all over and you can see multiple finishes on the reverse side, as we have a polished channel along the edge of every bridge. Then we have anglage on the edge of the bridge, and then in the center we have frosted and blackened surfacing. We have golden chaton fixing the pivot jewels, and that is a nod to the pocket watch era of watchmaking in Le Chaux de Fonds. And then we have many sharp interior angles where bevels meet. And of course, this watch is 100 meters water resistant, so it is a true sports watch. Light, base metal titanium, well loomed, and thoroughly water resistant at 100 meters. It also comes with the security of a full double deployant Grubel Forsey clasp, an easy watch to wear, and a timepiece that offers the best of everything in terms of exclusivity, engineering, as well as finishing. Again, a 3-day power reserve. If you want something with comparable wrist presence, but at a lower price, from H. Moser & C. of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, we have here the Pioneer Center Seconds turquoise fume dial. Now, there's a lot going on here. If you look closely, you could see it's a fume, which in Moser speak means it's a fade from light at the center to dark at the edge. They call this turquoise or turquoise, and you could see that it features a Moser logo that is a shallow engraving for minimal branding. They don't need to boast. You know who makes this watch. The design is that strong. Now we have a globalite ceramic material that's used for the lumen. There is plenty of luminescence. This watch, the Pioneer Center Second, is a sports watch, 120 meters water resistant. It's an automatic winder with a 3-day power reserve and hacking seconds. It is a very sporty timepiece, and you can see this is a different dial than was included on the original Pioneer Center Seconds watches. It's been conformed somewhat to the design of the Streamliner, and it is a gorgeous, lovable watch on the wrist. 42.8 millimeters. It's big, and it's close in size to the Grubel Forsey, but it has a completely different presence with large, long, flowing lugs that feature scalloped sides and coined profiles. So there's a very, very different look than the Grubel Forsey. Turn it all over, and you can see it's more of a sports watch through and through. As in general, sports watches are automatic winding, and that's what we have right here with this HMC 200 movement. It's got a relatively relatively thick construction with a full balance bridge and a free-sprung balance for toughness. And then it uses a rotor with ceramic bearings for better durability overall. It uses a magic lever bidirectional pawl-based winding system, beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, again, a 3-day power reserve. And Moser makes the tough parts of the movement, not just the bridges and the plates and the wheels. They make the escapement, they make the balance, and they make the hairspring all in-house. And a screw-down crown. The watch is 120 meters water resistant. We have a matching turquoise strap, and you can see there's a little bit of a gusseting to prevent the gouging of the perforations for the pin buckle. And you can see that the pin buckle echoes the coining of the case flank. Moser cases are machined and then hand finished to create this exceptional depth, and there's a lot of contrasting between satin and polish and coining. A lot going on, a deceptively complex watch in an outwardly simple package. Now let's talk about another one from Moser. This one's a bit more my speed, a bit smaller and thinner. This watch launched in 2020. It is the H. Moser & C Streamliner center seconds in matrix green. So once again, we have that fume fade dial, but it's matrix green. It is a bright acid green with a sunburst at the center. You can see applied, polished hour indices, and you can see this one too features that globalite ceramic material. The watch is a no-date dial, which keeps it clean. It has a large, elaborate 70s inspired tonneau case. There's a little bit of Ebel Sport Classic in this bracelet, maybe Omega Speedsonic lobster tail chronograph in the design of the case, a little bit of maybe Speedmaster Mark series, and we've got perhaps a little bit of Oris Chronoris Star. The good thing about this watch is that it makes obvious reference to the 70s, but it doesn't plagiarize the era the way a lot of Royal Oak and Nautilus knockoffs in this category do. This watch is very much its own thing, right down to the hollows of the case flank. The bracelet is organic, seamless, with incredible build tolerances, and as you can see, elaborate, almost organic shapes and finishing. The watch is only 12 millimeters thick and 40 millimeters in diameter, so it wears really nicely on my wrist. Super comfortable and fairly narrow across the wrist. This wears a lot better than the bigger Perpetual calendar and flyback Streamliner models. It's still 120 meters water resistant with a 3-day automatic winding power reserve. Just like the Pioneer, they share a movement. This one just has a different fit, feel, and fashion to it. And of course, the bracelet is wonderfully constructed and silken on the wrist. You can see things are a little bit different on the case back, as here we have a rose gold rotor, but it is fundamentally the same movement, HMC 200, and it is a good looking one at that. Remember, when you get the Streamliner flyback, you're getting an Audemars movement, which is great, but with this, you're getting a Moser through and through, both design, watch, and the movement. Now, speaking of sporting watches, here are two that range from a sports watch to a sporty watch. Let's talk about the Urban Jurgensen one. Of course, this is Urban Jurgensen's entry into the integrated bracelet sports watch category. 41 millimeters in stainless steel with integrated bracelet. I have to say the watch wears large. It's more like a 42 or a 43 on the wrist, and I'll show you that to good advantage. It has a lot of presence. It is a large tonneau form, and the timepiece has an enormous span across the wrist. Now, it can be sized down to be more compact, and obviously it has several removable links for precise sizing, but think of this as more like a 41 millimeter Royal Oak or even a 42 millimeter offshore, and you get the general sense of how it fits. Now, it is relatively thin though. Unlike the offshore, this one will slide underneath the cuff. Kari Voutilainen recently became the primary stakeholder in Urban Jurgensen, a Swiss brand with Danish roots, and so he's betting that there's going to be immense growth and maturity in this brand over the next few years, and he's bringing his reputation along with him. So this is a brand that has a very bright future. Now, the watch is over 100 meters water resistant, and it features a well-loomed dial, so you can see it's not conventional. It doesn't particularly look like a Royal Oak or a Nautilus, but it's very much of that era and in that vein. Taking a quick look at the case back, and it is a gorgeous case back. You can see that the watch includes an Urban Jurgensen in-house caliber. First of all, it is beautifully finished, as there's absolutely no shortage of real fire-blued screws, Côte de Soleil radiating out from the balance, and mirrored anglage in impressive quantities. We also have a number of things, such as polished pins for locating the bridge or mounting the winding mass, and no corners cut. We have a 22-karat gold winding mass, not 21, not 18, and certainly not tungsten. It's automatic winding with with a 3-day power reserve. It has stop seconds and a quick set date, and for sports watch purposes, we get a rotor bearing rather than a jeweled staff, relatively thick construction, and then a full balance bridge with a free sprung balance, again, for toughness and credibility as a sports watch. The case flank is interesting as the lugs do step out a little bit, not quite a blended Calatrava profile, but nor is it as dramatically dissonant or jarring as the break between case and lugs on something like a Longa Odysseus. This is very much its own thing, right down to the wave pattern or vague pattern of the center dial. It's a lovely sort of charcoal, maybe anthracite dial is the best way to describe it, between gray and black. Now here's a watch that is also stainless steel and sporty, 44 millimeters in steel. This is the Arnold & Son CTB, chronograph true beat. So what you've got at center are coaxial running second and chronograph hands. Now you have a deadbeat seconds hand, and that's for telling the time. And then you have a sweep seconds hand, 8 beats per second for the chronograph. So you can see when I stop the chronograph, the deadbeat seconds hand continues to tick, and the chronograph seconds hand stops. Now here too, as with the Nautilus, we have a 60-minute chronograph register, which I like because that's a little bit more useful than a 30-minute register, as most things I time with a chronograph are going to be under an hour, but they're often over 30 minutes in duration, which creates guesswork if you don't remember how long the chronograph's been operating. With a 60-minute register, that's a lot easier to keep track of. Several different finishes on this dial. We have a sandpaper-like granular texture for the primary dial. We have opaline for the hours, minutes, and the center of the chronograph register. Then we have a brushed metallic for the track outboard used to read seconds as well as fractions of seconds. And you see that same track is used for the 60 minutes register for the chrono. Now there's also a lot of depth to this dial, which you can see well here in a dramatically boxed section sapphire. This is a wonderfully labor-intensive case to make. As you can see, it's hand polished, but then if you look closely, you can also see the lugs are welded on manually. That is an expensive and traditional way to make a case. This watch is extensively handcrafted and hand finished, and that continues on the movement side, where the manufacturer caliber 7103 is exclusive to this watch. Now, Arnold & Son is the brand of a manufacturer called La Jubilee out of La Chaux-de-Fonds. Arnold & Son makes about 700 watches a year. La Jubilee wanted to have its own brand, so it created Arnold & Son, and later, on a much smaller scale, Angelus. So they make about 600 Arnold & Son watches a year, about 70 Angelus watches per year. So this is haute horlogerie, and I would even say independent watchmaking on a grand scale, though I will note that they are owned by Citizen Group of Japan, which largely just gives them money to make nice things and maintain them, as the Citizen Group has had just about no influence on what decisions are made from an artistic or engineering standpoint. So it's the best of both worlds. An independent style manufacturer with big money behind it. Now you can see we have a rotor, automatic winding, 45 to 50 hour power reserve. We have a column wheel with black polished crenellations and a very, very crisp actuation, 4 hertz beat rate, and as you can see, the watch does include a hacking seconds function. It is also a vertical clutch chronograph, as when you start it, there is no jump to the chronograph seconds hand, and if you like, you can just leave the chronograph seconds hand running full time, which some people will do because it is a very intriguing look to have both seconds hands going. The finishing is gorgeous. There's a nickel anthracite coating over everything. All screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots and circumference. If you look carefully, you can see that the anglage is a mile wide and mirrored. No milling marks to be seen here. We have Côte de Soleil, unlike on the Urban Jurgensen 1, where they radiated out as a sunburst from the balance. Here you can see they radiate out from underneath the winding rotor. There's engine turning on the plates, and you can see satination on some of the springs as well as the wheels. Very, very impressive, technically speaking, and aesthetically. It's also a hugely innovative watch from a design standpoint. I'm actually thinking of buying this as my next watch. I always use the chronograph for doing workouts and for timing my videos, so I need one of those. And you can see the watch, though large, surprisingly fits on a 16-centimeter circumference wrist, and that's largely down to the shape of Arnold & Son lugs, which I admire quite a bit. A handsome watch and versatile in steel. This one is an original. You don't see too many that are this different in the chronograph space, where there's a lot of repetition. This is a first ever. Now, back in 2006 and 2007, De Bethune started to roll out its DB25 collection. So these watches were, even by the standards of the day, a little bit more conventional than the other stuff De Bethune was launching at the time. You can see there's some fingerprints on the sapphire. Don't mind those. I'll wipe them off if you buy the watch. But this is the DB25, a watch that was designed to give solid dials, conventional lugs, and a more approachable aesthetic for folks who are perhaps coming over from more conventional Vacheron, Patek, Lange, or even FP Journe dress watches. So here you can see De Bethune at its best. They make their cases, their dials, their movements, so every part of this watch is made in-house. We have a micro-light engraving of the center dial. This is their version of guilloche. So instead of having a Piguet-like guilloche, which would be out of place on a watch this modern, they have a very fine cut, and it's all concentric circles on a blued titanium center dial, and they have a patent for bluing titanium. Sometimes it's a gloss blue, as you see on the hour indices. Those are also titanium. Sometimes it's a matte blue, which you can see on the track outboard as well as the center dial. And note that the track outboard features a metallized or metal deposited minutes track as well as minute numerals. The hands are black polished with a sort of ellipso-curvex shape. Then we have a power reserve up at the top. This is the DB25 power reserve. And of course, you can see I can wind the watch manually if I wish, and I can watch the power reserve travel. But when I flip this 44mm white gold watch over, you can actually see the movement is an automatic winder, so I don't need to wind it. A lot of innovation here. 6-day power reserve, automatic winding, the 6-day reserve provided by twin self-adjusting mainspring barrels that cannot accidentally be overwound, and that is patented. They are self-adjusting, and that self-adjusting quality is patented. Here we have a rotor that maximizes winding efficiency with a titanium arm. So the arms are actually made of titanium, and then the mass is platinum. Not gold, not tungsten, platinum. As dense as possible. Not the cheapest way to build a watch, but the best way to build a winding system. Because you do have such a huge effective lever arm with these long extensions out to the mass, we need shock protection at center. So we have a rotor bearing with 1, 2, 3, 4 cantilevered shock protection springs. That too is patented. We have 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs on the balance, both for durability against shock and for more rapidly recentering the balance staff for chronometry. You can see we have a balance, a proprietary design. It's shaped like, I would say, 2 yokes crosswise. So it's not a balance wheel. It's non-annular. It's made of titanium with platinum masses outboard. As with the winding rotor, the point is to put as much mass outboard as possible. We have a 2-element flat hairspring, so it's 2 different elements shaped by hand and then clamped together, so they're flat like a flat hairspring. They don't take up the depth that an overcoil does, but they breathe concentrically and keep even time in any position the way an overcoil does, and this is yet another patent. This timepiece is loaded with De Bethune original ideas, and once again, they make the case, the movement, and the dial. So as with Montre Journe, you are getting a watch that is all De Bethune, that is all manufacture, and they've built fewer than 3,000 watches since their founding in 2002. Remember, FP Journe makes about 900 watches a year, so you're getting a sense of the exclusivity of this rising brand, which I should mention is my favorite brand. I'll also mention that we own them, but if you go back to my videos since 2016, you can see I have lavished praise on De Bethune over the years. Now what we have here is a watch that was only ever built in 5 pieces, as you see. We have a Fumé Grand Tapisserie dial in the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak minute repeater Super Sonnerie. It is a watch that is, quite frankly, as audibly loud as it is visually loud. So we have a grade 5 titanium case. We have a hollow titanium caseback resonator, and we have a minute repeater that can do some fun things. Let me see if it's set. If it's set to 12:59, then you're going to hear the full panoply of dings and rings and chimes and bells. If it's set to 1 o'clock, you'll know. But let's take a quick... Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set this to 12:59. So I'm going to set this watch forward to 12:59. And here's how this works. A minute repeater chimes the hours, a double chime then chimes the quarters after the hour, and then you have the chimes representing the minutes after the final quarter. So you should hear 12 chimes, 3 double chimes, and then 14 chimes. It is a very vocal watch, and it is a Royal Oak, not an offshore, so it wears a little bit better than you might think. Now, inside we have the caliber a 2935. It is a Audemars Piguet Renault Papi movement, so it comes from their ultra haute de gamme division. Manual wind, it's a 72-hour power reserve, and it is a very sophisticated minute repeater, not just for its tonal quality and its volume, but for the fact that, among other things, it is designed to skip over the gap that would normally exist if the watch isn't set past 1/4 of an hour. There's normally a gap in a standard minute repeater between chiming of the hours and chiming of the minutes. Normally you would have a time gap in there whether or not the quarters are chimed. But here you can see there is no first quarter. We have not advanced past 15 minutes. So I'm going to activate the watch and you'll hear it skip straight from hours to minutes without the quarters in between. See how that works? Now, it is a very livable watch. In grade 5 titanium, it's both lighter and more scratch resistant than steel. It is very well loomed. Although Audemars Piguet represents 20 meters water resistant, I would not test that theory, as this is a very expensive chiming watch, and you probably have a standard offshore if you want to get wet and wild with your Royal Oak. I will mention that this fade tapisserie dial is exceptionally rare on Audemars Piguet timepieces, and you only see it on true flagship models. Again, only 5 were made as you see it right here. This is a very special watch, reference 26591 Ti. You do not see too many gradient fade tapisserie dials, and because this is not an offshore, it is a pantograph cut dial, not a stamped mega tapisserie. This is a very special piece at Audemars Piguet. This is a very special piece in Saxony. In East Germany, a Lange und Söhne is the king. Now, it's true, there are others like Marco Lang, or, for example, Moritz Grossmann, or even Lang und Theine, that are beautiful, low volume, and artisanal. But for consistent excellence, a Lange und Söhne is the point of reference. And in 2016, the company launched this, the Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon, and it is everything the name implies. It is a flyback datograph, it is a perpetual calendar, it is a tourbillon, but it's more. It has a power reserve for the 50-hour manual wind power reserve. It has a solid white gold date, or moon phase disc, I should say. It also has monotone discs for the date. So we have a double date, both black with white on black print. And then there is a system that allows you to step everything in sync. So let's say you fall 3 days behind, the watch stops. You wind it up, you set the time, and then you step 3 times. Everything moves in sync, so you don't have to adjust the indications individually. Now, the moon phase disc is 22 karat white gold. That's how they make moon phase discs at Lange. This is a perpetual calendar, so it only needs to be reset once in the year 2100. And it's surprisingly sporty with a loomed dial and a tachymeter scale outboard for gauging the speed of, say, a race car across a kilometer. We have white gold frame for the date, white gold hands, white gold hour indices. Turn it all over, you have a movement that is figuratively gold. This watch is a 100-piece limited edition, and this one's not particularly sensitive. I can take that off right there. You can see that it is a 100-piece limited series in platinum, exceptionally comfortable, exceptionally wearable at 41.5 millimeters, so you get the weight of platinum, but not the sprawl of an oversized watch. We have a column wheel that is full black polished. We have a clutch that is fully jeweled. We have a tourbillon that includes, among other things, a stop seconds function. It's also free sprung, 5-position adjusted, and uses an overcoil hairspring. You could see that both the tourbillon cage and the balance cock are black polished, and then the root of the balance cock has been freehand engraved. You can also appreciate the fact that we have sharp interior angles within the balance cock, and then again on the clutch. And you can see the clutch is all steel, so these sharp outward points and sharp inward angles are that much more difficult to achieve as beveling runs along converging converging lines or diverging lines. Very impressive stuff. The bridges and plates are all German silver, so a nickel copper zinc alloy with the copper giving it its golden hue. You can also see that the depth of the movement is extraordinary. Everything that's silver is made of steel. Everything that has a golden hue, with the exception of the balance on the wheels, is German silver. And you'll see we have both black polished screws and fire blued screws. The watch includes both. The feel of the column wheel is best in the industry, and the lateral clutch is gorgeous. The watch has an instantaneous jumping minute hand, and quite simply, this watch has everything to recommend it. We have a deployant clasp here. This is not common on Lange watches, and you can see that Lange still uses Swiss suppliers for its cases and its buckles in many instances, as this one says Swiss made right on the inside. Let's see if we can figure out who made this Lange case. Okay, FTOR, that's who made it, because it says FT right there. They also have cases from SUG, a Zinn company, and Centror, which is a company owned by, I believe Centror is owned by Audemars Piguet, and FTOR is owned by Richemont. So that's where Lange cases come from. Now, you know, the dial is sterling silver and black galvanized. Now here's a very special piece from Moser, and I have to say, with a lot of Moser watches that aren't streamliners, they all sort of blur together for me. The Pioneers, the Endeavors, the Venturers, there's a lot of them. This, on the other hand, is one of only 20 made, and it's unlike anything else. It is the Heritage Perpetual Calendar Midnight Blue Grand Faux enamel. So midnight blue enamel, you can see the watch has a very subtle fume fade. It's dark at the center and dark at the edge, but it is lighter at the center than it is at the edge. This is a fired disc of vitreous gold on top, or I should say vitreous enamel on top of a gold base. So when you're enameling, you take a gold base, and generally it's a white gold base, and then you take a glass-based paint, you apply it to the top, and you fire it at 800 degrees centigrade. Up to 20 different firings will be used to create the Grand Faux effect, a wonderful, glossy, lustrous, almost wet paint look that stays beautiful forever and will never oxidize or tarnish. Now we have lovely spade style and assegai style hand. They also call them swallow's tail hands at Moser. You can see there's a power reserve indicator on the side of the dial. The watch has a 7-day manual wind power reserve, though in fact it will run for almost 9. And we have a perpetual calendar system designed by Andreas Streller, a great independent watchmaking legend. He is known for hidden complexity, and that's what we have right here. So you can see that we have a bidirectional date system, and we have a date, and I'll pull the crank out one more time. By the way, we do have hacking seconds here. We have a little stub, 12 hours, 12 months. So you have right here, the 7th hour, that's July 4th. So that is the 4th of July, America's Independence Day. Now the watch includes a number of refinements, such as case flank enamel. The case flank has been engraved, and you can see over that is a translucent blue enamel. So this is known as flinke enamel, and it's rendered all the way around. Now the watch has a heritage look. It's designed to evoke the look of a pocket watch converted into a wristwatch, as you would have seen in the early 20th century. It's 42 millimeters in diameter in white gold, and they only made 20 of these back in 2021, so it is a very rare piece, and it's a piece of rare beauty. It also wears exceptionally well. It's about 47 millimeters from lug to lug, which I adore because that makes the watch easy for me to wear, and it's got a nice reassuring weight to it, being made of white gold. When you turn it over, you can see this is HMC 800, an in-house caliber from Moser that is a manual wind perpetual calendar. Andreas Streller realized that you don't need to know the leap year phase all that often, so he put it on the case back. You can adjust it with a case flank pusher. And then we have 2 barrels. Each barrel arbor is set in a golden chaton fixed by screws. So this is a very subtle nod to pocket watch making. And Moser, from the 1820s through the early 20th century, was known for making pocket watches. Back then, jewels would be set in golden chaton, which would then be fixed into bridges using screws, back before precision techniques existed to press jewels directly into bridges. That's what chaton were for. Now, you can see we have the look of a 3/4 bridge. It's actually split in half to make it easier to service, but we have the look of a 3/4 bridge from an old pocket watch, as well as a swan's neck style click spring drawn from that era. Now, you can see Moser uses a unique double crested frosted Côte de Genève that's quite attractive, and we have black polished screw heads. The assortment is quite fascinating. Moser makes the 14-karat gold escapement. It's 14-karat gold to reduce friction. Moser makes the overcoil hairspring as well as the balance. All of this is made in-house. The whole thing lifts out as a platform, and then at the regional Moser service affiliate, wherever you live, a pre-serviced module would be put in, and this is the most time-consuming part of a service. This speeds the watch back to you. It beats away at an aesthetically pleasing 18,000 vibrations per hour, and as I mentioned, it does feature a hacking seconds functionality, and this watch includes a rare feature for a Moser, a full deployment clasp in matching white gold. This one is a star for me. That said, I'm rolling out a lot of big guns at the end of this video, and you can see one right here. This is the David Condo DC7 Genesis. It came out last year, and it is a step forward for David Condo, who practices in a converted farm, and by farm I mean literally a converted barn in Le Soliat, which is a small town in the Vallée du Jeu. He is a third-generation watchmaker and engineer who's worked in the past for Baudelaire, Fonderie 47, Jaeger-LeCoultre, where he designed chiming watches. This watch takes the look he introduced back in 2017, and it updates it in a more sporting package. So the DC7 is 44 millimeters across in grade 5 titanium. As you can see, it is not just loomed, it is really well loomed, and it features a loomed tourbillon indicator. Now the watch has a blue sunburst dial that is inclined at 3 degrees relative to the case band, and then there's a flying tourbillon that's inclined at 30 degrees. So the idea here is that by canting it at an angle, regardless of where it is on your wrist, it's more likely to be operating in opposition to gravity as it circulates at its various angles of attack. But there's more to it than that. The hairspring is a hand-formed overcoil, so regardless of what position the watch is in, because it has a more centered mass, it breathes concentrically, it's less susceptible to gravity. We also have a free-sprung balance and a 6-position adjustment, so there's a lot of durability and resilience to variation engineered into this watch. Now, there's also something that he calls the magic crown, which can be used for winding and setting the watch, and you can see that it is spring-loaded, and it can be withdrawn for setting, it can be withdrawn for winding. And the watch is a manual wind. It does have a 72-hour power reserve. When you're done with the magic crown, it hides flush for protection. And on the reverse side, you can see the movement quite well. It is a gorgeous little movement. So they're only making 8, and by they, I mean David Condo and his very few employees. And this is a company that makes about 18 watches a year, so exclusivity is assured. Now, you can see the movement is made entirely of grade 5 titanium, and the bridges have been designed with symmetry in mind. Turkish oil stone has been used to create a frosting pattern across the surfaces, and you can see the edge of each bridge has a lovely mirrored anglage. All screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots in circumference, and you can see the little bridge at the center for the center wheel features sharp interior angles as well as mirror polish along its top, and 50 meters water resistant. It's a bit more than a standard dress watch, and with a 72-hour power reserve, you can wind the watch every 3 days and really value the time and enjoy the experience. This is a sporty take on David Condo's watchmaking, and I'm going to show you right now how the watch looks on my wrist. It's large, but don't be deceived by the 44 millimeter size. It doesn't wear large. It's comfortable, it's easy to wear, it's light on the wrist, it's even fairly flat, which you can see well there, and it's got a case shape unlike anything else, somewhere between an egg and a tonneau form, with that lovely iridescent blue metallic dial at center and plenty of lume. A lot of fun from one of the premier watchmakers, and of course he's a member of the AHCI, which is the cool kids club of independent watchmakers, alongside the likes of Dufour, Voudelainen, and Journe, so he's very much of that ilk and of that caliber. Now, we're not done with Mr. Condo, because right here we have a watch that came out in 2019, also a limited edition of 8 pieces. This is the DC6 Solstice, and this is actually my favorite of the two. You can see the magic crown in operation right here, setting the watch, and then I can hide it away when I'm done to protect it. 31 parts and a patent are applied to this crown mechanism. The case here is 43 millimeters in diameter, but it's only 12.9 millimeters thick, so it's nice and slim. This is based on his original 1740, so named because that was the year the first verified watchmaker took up practice in the Valet de Jeu. The watch is also grade 5 titanium, and as with the Genesis, it features grade 5 titanium bridges and plates, but here with a very different finish. As you can see, we have bridges here in black polished stainless steel, but also in titanium, and we have these lovely Côte du Soleil, named after the town of manufacture here. They are incredibly broad and luminous stripes. Somewhere between the way Moser and the Grunefelds finish their bridges, but to a higher standard certainly than the mostly machine-applied Moser finishing. You can see there's a luminosity and a gradient to these that you don't get on mass-produced stripes. You can also see that there are a lot of sharp interior angles. They're visible all over the bridges, on both the steel components and the titanium components, and it's not easy to finish titanium or steel. We have a large amount of black polish across those steel bridges and the little gold medallion with the symbol of David Condo, the bear. Of course, we've got a very progressive use of synthetics and Velcro on this strap, and the watch wears quite easily. There's a lot of unconventional thinking on this watch. The strap is a godsend because you're never going to be in between sizes here. The Velcro can be adjusted precisely no matter your size. And here's a use of not just dial side guilloche, but guilloche you can touch. It's a little bit unaccustomed, but we have this ricochet pattern that's been cut using a rose lathe onto the dial, two brackets flanking the display of time and the 1 minute 30-degree angled tourbillon. Now this too is free sprung with an overcoil, and compared to the 1740, we move the seconds hand from the center of the dial to the tourbillon itself. And a feature I have not seen on other watches, various tech information such as the lift angle of the escapement is actually engraved into the base plate so that future watchmakers will be able to service and repair these watches. We have a power reserve indicator. This one has a 55-hour manual line power reserve, and it beats away at 21.6. The timepiece from David Condo, whether it is the DC6 Solstice or the DC7 Genesis you just saw, always warranted for 10 years. So though these are pre-owned watches, they are very much protected. And you can see that the case design is quite original, with case flank bolts that give it a little bit of an industrial look that's very cool, technically progressive, and unusual. This is a watch that is very original. Is there a little bit of FP Journe tourbillon remontoir on the dial? Maybe a little bit, but it's very much David Condo's own take on a sporty tourbillon complication. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.